The nature of Darth Nihilus' speech, as described by Abel Pena, reveals profound insights into the enigmatic Sith Lord's connection to the Force. Nihilus, whose very existence defied traditional understanding of life and the Force, spoke an unsettling, literally extirpating tongue that mystified Jedi seers and mystics alike. Pena's description offers two potential interpretations of Nihilus language. Either it was the language of the end of time, or it was the raw dialect of the Force itself, unmediated by midichlorians. Both interpretations speak to the profound and horrifying nature of Darth Nihilus, but the latter hypothesis, that Nihilus spoke the raw language of the Force, offers a chilling explanation for his unnatural abilities and his relationship to the galaxy's life force. Darth Nihilus' speech was far more than mere communication. It was a weapon, a force of destruction that echoed his insatiable hunger for life energy. As Pena describes, Nihilus' voice had an extirpating effect, reflecting his fundamental nature as a wound in the Force. His speech was so alien and incomprehensible that it shattered the minds of those who heard it, evoking primal fear and dread. Even Jedi seers, trained to understand and interpret the mysteries of the Force, struggled to comprehend its nature. The possibility that Nihilus language was the raw dialect of the Force itself is particularly compelling. Unlike most Force users, whose connection to the Force is mediated through midichlorians, Nihilus existed outside the natural cycle of life and death. His speech, therefore, bypassed the typical constraints of life and resonated with the very essence of the Force. This raw connection made his voice not only incomprehensible but also lethal, as it disrupted the listener's connection to the Force itself. The Force, as understood by Jedi and Sith, is typically perceived through midichlorians, microscopic life forms that act as intermediaries between living beings and the energy field of the galaxy. Nihilus, however, was an aberration. His existence as a wound in the Force severed him from the natural processes of life, leaving him reliant on the consumption of Force energy to sustain himself. If Nihilus spoke the raw language of the Force, it would mean that his connection to the Force was unfiltered and unmediated. This raw dialect would represent the pure essence of the Force, stripped of any interpretation by living beings. Such a language would not be constrained by the constructs of words or grammar, but would instead convey meaning directly through the vibrations of the Force itself. This would explain why Nihilus' speech was unintelligible to most beings. Its meaning existed beyond the comprehension of those bound by the limitations of life and midichlorians. Pena's description that one needed only die to comprehend it speaks to the profound relationship between Nihilus language and the nature of the Force. In the Star Wars mythos, death often represents a deeper connection to the Force, as seen with Force ghosts and the transcendence of Jedi such as Yoda and Obi-Wan. If Nihilus' speech was the raw dialect of the Force, it would be understandable only to those who had transcended the barriers of life, those who had become one with the Force. This idea adds to the existential horror of Nihilus. His voice could strip away the very essence of life, leaving only death and emptiness in its wake. To comprehend his speech would mean to surrender one's connection to the living Force, effectively succumbing to the void that Nihilus embodied. In this way, Nihilus language was a reflection of his nature. It was both the means by which he consumed life and a symbol of his existence as a being unbound by the natural order. Nihilus' ability to speak this raw language underscores his separation from the Sith tradition. While Sith Lords typically used the Force to impose their will on the galaxy, Nihilus was driven purely by hunger. His speech, like his existence, was not an act of will but a manifestation of the chaos and destruction he represented. This distinction sets Nihilus apart from other Sith Lords, making him a unique and terrifying figure in the Star Wars expanded universe. The alternative hypothesis offered by Jedi seers, that Nihilus language was spoken billions of years hence, at the end of all time, offers an intriguing perspective on his nature. If true, this interpretation suggests that Nihilus existed outside the normal flow of time, his voice a harbinger of the galaxy's ultimate fate. This aligns with the idea of Nihilus as a wound in the Force, a being whose existence defied the natural order. While this theory is fascinating, the notion of Nihilus speaking the raw language of the Force provides a more grounded explanation for his abilities and the terror he inspired. By bypassing the constraints of life and midichlorians, Nihilus accessed a deeper, more primal connection to the Force, one that reflected the fundamental nature of existence itself. Darth Nihilus' speech, as described by Abel Pena, was far more than a mere linguistic phenomenon. It was an extension of his nature as a wound in the Force, a reflection of his unmediated connection to the raw energies of the galaxy. By speaking the raw language of the Force, Nihilus bypassed the limitations of life and midichlorians, embodying the primal chaos of the dark side. This ability, both terrifying and incomprehensible, underscored the existential horror of Nihilus and his separation from the natural order. In doing so, it cemented his legacy as one of the most enigmatic and unsettling figures in the Star Wars expanded universe.